Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon, almost. I'm actually really excited to be in one of my favorite countries in the world with some of my favorite people. So I will let our panelists introduce themselves, but Firat and I, we met 6-7 years ago. Investing in Turkey, I made one of my first angel investments out there with Firat back in Turkey. Jenn is a rock star in the Valley. Everyone knows her. And Summer, when it comes to global ecosystems, is probably one of the top people to talk to and to meet. This is probably 10th country we're in together. So, but before we get going, I'll give you each 30 to 60 seconds to introduce yourselves. And also, I will want the background from you, but also if you can throw a fact that our audience cannot Google about you.
Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, great. My name is Firat. I co-founded a company called Positron about 12 years ago. We were focusing on mobile banking, payments, and commerce software before the iPhone and the Android came out. We sold our business to a British tech firm called Monitise about 3 years ago. We did a quite successful exit, and then afterwards I started investing in companies. I still run the business I sold to, Monitise actually, which was recently sold to Pfizer, so it feels a bit like an inception here, but this is how startup life is. The fun fact about myself, actually, I was a EF supervisor for 6 years in a row, and never came to Malta though. I was supervising EF students in France, US, and England. So it was my first experience as managing, you know, difficult situations. Teenagers mostly.
Hi, I'm Jenn Hirsch. I've been working in startups for 20-some years as a founder, operator, researcher, but always a trend scout. And I am a native of San Francisco, which is unusual these days with everybody in the Valley. And the fun fact about me is long before the internet, all the videos proliferated, I was on a reality TV dating show, and you can't find any footage, thank God.
Okay, challenge accepted. Okay. So I'm Lebanese.
Burning Man stories or not?
No. Well, we'll find it. I'm Lebanese, so to all the Maltese in the audience, we're genetically related. Which makes things interesting because I got on a motorcycle yesterday and did 7 hours of riding around Malta, and it's a very interesting country. So I helped build Lebanon's ecosystem from scratch over the course of 10 years, and in that process I got involved with people across the world, from Southeast Asia to Scandinavia to the Baltics to the Balkans to Latin America and so on and so forth. And after 10 years of doing that, I decided that 10 years is enough, so I retired. And people are like, but you're too young to retire. But I felt that maybe I needed to spend a little more time with my dog. So, so now I travel around the world with my dog. But anyway, the story is, the little known fact is I used to be a war journalist in 2006. And it was interesting because it taught me how to look at things in as impartial a way as possible. And I was a war photojournalist, so from behind the lens of a camera. And those stories are for another session, but yeah.
I thought we were good friends and I never heard about those stories.
You asked for that.
So today we're going to talk about global markets, global trends, and how to spot some of the best talent out there. But before we get going with the questions, rapid fire question for 2018, bull market or bear market?
Well,
for startups.
Stock market or startups? I'm bullish. I'm always bullish with startups. Stock market, I don't know.
Bull.
Bubble.
Bubble? We're still in the bubble, you think?
No, bubble is bull.
Yeah. Bubble.
Bubble.
Bubble. Yeah.
Well, let's get going with that then. So you said bubble. So how do you compare that in the US versus Europe? Because in the US, yes, we were in a bubble, but I live in the Valley and I kind of feel like it's kind of calming down. Valuations are going down, funding ecosystem is still very active, but the valuations are definitely going down. How do you compare that to, you've been on a tour with your dog in how many countries now?
18?
18 so far. So you've observed a lot, you talked to a lot of people. How do you compare, how do you make that comparison in terms of the funding ecosystem?
So the problem is that you can't ask this question outside of the United States. The only place you can ask bear or bull is the United States. Because in the United States, people are either asleep and in hibernation mode, or they're charging at you and they want your blood. Okay, so I really don't see that in any other culture around the world. It's not a bad thing. It's just
I take personal offense.
Oh, well, it's fine. This should make the panel more interesting. But it's integral to the U.S. culture. In Europe, I'm seeing a shift from that, from the U.S. culture of bear or bull, and there's a very sustainable uptick in how startups are forming, how they're being invested in. We're not seeing obsessive valuations. We're not seeing any crazy stuff. So I'd say US, it's still very much a bubble. Yes, the valuations have shifted down in normal VC, but I don't know if you've read about any ICOs taking place. Okay, $250 million for a pack of cigarettes. I mean, figure of speech. Okay, yeah. It's absurd. So there's still a bubble there.
And Jenn, I think you have a lot of data when it comes to that. Like, how would you, if you want to talk about the global funding climate right now, what would be some of the top trends you can talk about?
So I look a lot at angel investment because I'm looking at early stage trends. And in the US, there's a proliferation of funding at the angel level. And then it drops off in a steep cliff, especially right now, to carry on forward in Series A and Series B. But there's so much money now on a global scale because of what has happened previously in the startup ecosystem. And so what you have now is a whole crop of startups. It's cheaper to get it done. It's cheaper to raise funds. You don't have to go through new funds. But there's kind of a morass of innovation with no direction as to arbitration if that's good or bad. So talk about a journalist life, you always have a point of view about here's where we're going to go. And now, because of the low startup costs, you have less of an ability to say this one is going to be the next Uber. And the next Uber could come from any country, in my opinion, these days. So.
And when it comes to early stage investing, of course, angels are some of the most important players out there, and you have been a very active angel investor. I met you back in Turkey while you were angel investing there, but then you invested in the US, in Mexico, in Australia. So how would you say your perspective of angel investing has changed since you first started versus now?
As an investor, I try to avoid seed investments in the US because they're quite overvalued. And, since I don't live in the US, the deals that come to us are usually the deals that are, either got a pass from, the usual suspects of angel investors in the Valley, or, they're just like under the radar. So I try to find opportunities around the world, and I see actually a lot of them. The information is everywhere. You have access to it, but it's still, not, well spread out. So if you have access to information and if you know how to invest as an angel investor, there's so many opportunities in countries other than the US right now. So for example, Japan is at a very nascent stage. You really see very few startups, but it's one of the largest economies in the world. Australia, it's down under, it's so far from here, but it's one of the most successful economies out there in terms of per capita growth, sustainable growth. So stuff that I learned in conferences in the Silicon Valley or startups we meet in the Valley, I get that information and I try to actually invest in elsewhere. So in terms of things I've learned, you just try not to catch the trend. Don't just chase the trendy startups, trendy labels such as we're based in Palo Alto, we're Redwood City, we're like SF downtown. I don't really care about that. I just look at the product, the entrepreneur mostly, and I really like some cities, some countries in the world, such as Berlin, Stockholm, London, Barcelona. So I try to, my theme is mostly, I really invest in places where I really want to spend time, and so I can actually be smart money. Otherwise, if you don't want to go there, if you don't want to spend time with this entrepreneur, if you don't want to go out, have a few drinks with the entrepreneur, then you don't really become smart money, and your money is just there to invest. So you just invest in the stock market instead.
And of course, all three of you are very global, and going back to the trends, What do you think in the global landscape stays the same and kind of changes over the time in the
Well, I want to build on what Firat said, right, which is the Silicon Valley ethos and mantra is kind of permeated everywhere. And so I've grown up through two of the startups revolution, and it got codified over the past few years and really narrow. And so that ethos has now been taken abroad. But I'm looking to Australia as well because you've got an ecosystem that repeats that mantra, but they're creating really innovative things. And all these other global markets, each of them create something with their own point of view. And so I'm looking around the world to say that, yes, people might still have a touch point in Silicon Valley, but there's all this language and interpretation of that mantra that may come and create the next big trends. So looking to these ecosystems, Stockholm, Australia, Asia, Southeast Asia even, to see what they create and how those solutions then translate and spread with all this global community. Look, this whole stage is such an international mix. And we're all traveling and exchanging information. And that speed of information is going to enable what I think is the next interesting wave of trends. So.
Yeah, and then we look at all these different ecosystems, different regions. Of course, Stockholm is very different from London. London is very different from Madrid. And some specialize in fintech. Some cities are, like Paris actually right now is great in ag tech. And you have all these like different hubs around the world. They're different, culturally they're different. But do you think there is common recipe for success, or do you see common patterns among entrepreneurs around the world that all those startups that succeed have?
Oh, wow. Common recipe. I'd say 5 years ago, yes. Maybe 2 years ago, yes. The world is getting more and more fragmented, and this is not a dystopian view of the world. And this fragmentation is creating different cultures in the entrepreneurial space. So I think the argument that other countries are onboarding the culture of the US could be made 2 years ago. Today it's becoming much, much less relevant simply because people are starting to see cracks in the Silicon Valley model from Silicon Valley. You don't have to go to Silicon Valley to see it. The Google email, the Uber firing, and then the second firing in Uber, the 500 startups issue. All of these things are purely culturally derived from the Silicon Valley model. And the world is naturally shifted from that. And it's funny, it actually shifted from that before those happened, but almost at the same time they were happening. So I was able to witness both of the things, the shift and the people talking about all this crazy shit. And I realized in that process that the world is redefining what success is, okay? And each culture is redefining what success is in the perspective of its culture. And I don't know what that means, but I think it's interesting to see that because soft power, US soft power is diminishing at such a speed around the world, at an accelerated speed, that people have to define a very different meaning for entrepreneurship for it to stay relevant. And it has to be relevant because people are without jobs. So you have to create jobs, but you can't create jobs, so you empower people to be entrepreneurs, but you can't have a global version of entrepreneurship, so people are creating local versions. Which is interesting because it's always been that case. Every country started with a few entrepreneurs, right? It's not a 5-minute discussion.
Do you think there's
Actually, I 100% agree with you. Defining success is changing. So it's this new generation actually, which is redefining success and happiness and fulfillment. So is success, self-fulfillment? So if it's self-fulfillment, why would people appreciate you as a successful person? So you need to add value and create value to your ecosystem, to your surrounding, and to the people whom you work with. So those are the actually entrepreneurs that are becoming more and more successful. Uber is the best example for this. Travis built an $80 billion company, but like the practices and the company culture was so bad that actually, it's losing all of its, success image. It's already lost the success image. And like I was talking to a friend of mine, so this guy has basically changed the world. I went to Bangkok, I'm using Uber. I go to, not Malta, but like a lot of places in the world, and I can use Uber. And it's just saving me from the biggest hassle of dealing with a taxi driver in local currency. But since this guy has become like one of the most evil figures in the valley. And he said, like, that's technology actually. If Uber wasn't going to do it, somebody else was going to do it. So he better have a better culture, because this is going to be the new norm in the future. And if Uber wants to be the monopoly or wants to be the most successful company in this business, they just have to behave themselves. That's what he said. And they should start learning, and they should start
That's something I very strongly disagree with.
There you go.
Uber was successful because of the culture, not in spite of it. And Silicon Valley is successful because of its fuck everyone else, we're doing this our way. Okay. If you take that out of Silicon Valley, there's very little left, because the end always justifies the means. Have you been to you live in San Francisco, okay? Like 99% of the people in San Francisco are homeless, okay? And then, at least the ones you see,
sure.
Okay? And then the streets are worse than literally every country I've been to, and I haven't been to Zimbabwe, so that may be the only, okay? And the streets, the highways, the infrastructure, the smell of piss everywhere, the homeless people, the disparity. It is the most, over $1 trillion of value has been created in the last 10 years in San Francisco, and you don't see any of it.
Well, because it doesn't stay there.
But
so why do you disagree? Why do you disagree? Why do you disagree with me?
I disagree with you because the culture of these companies is not going to change if they are from Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley requires it. Silicon Valley created Travis, and then once Travis was successful, they lynched him. But instead of lynching him, they should lynch themselves, because Silicon Valley created Travis.
But I would say it's this version of Silicon Valley. It's the past 5 years. It doesn't look anything like the original 1996 to 2002, which was a different culture, and the past decade's culture. And Tugce and I were having this conversation last night about all the waves of innovation that have gone through San Francisco all the way back to the 1600s. And if I'm looking ahead, which I am, to the next wave of entrepreneurs, there are 3 critical traits for the next wave of entrepreneurs, no matter where they come from, Silicon Valley or otherwise. Dogged persistence, commitment to vision, and the ability to check their ego at the door, which was nothing that anybody ever told to Travis.
So that is a very Silicon Valley perspective. The first
so then, defining success is going to change because the geography is changing. There's diversity being introduced. That's actually what I was trying to say. So it's not going to happen in Silicon Valley, but the world of entrepreneurship is changing because
the first trait in Europe that I encountered was not these 3. The first trait was community, society, family. That was ahead of all of the traits that you put. Anyone other than you, because you're a local to San Francisco, okay? In San Francisco, if they lose their startup, if they lose whatever they're doing, okay, like Dave McClure, okay, life ends. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in San Francisco if you don't have a startup or you don't have a ton of money you're sitting on? There's nothing to do, okay? Because you have to be part of that, unless you're from San Francisco, okay? No, but the people who are from San Francisco are a very small subset of Silicon Valley.
So that's like an outsider's in perspective. Like, that's what people who say they're only there to play the game, which I understand. But that, of course, if you're only there to play the game, why else are you there?
And that's the same thing about New York or London.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's also the same mentality that created all the problems we have, because everybody comes in from the outside and they're like, I'm only here to play the game. I'm not here to communicate, to give back to the community or whatever, which arguably is a failing of this version of.
That's another conversation, though. Yeah. That's more like why the culture in Silicon Valley or San Francisco
correct.
is suffering. I mean, I was reading an article the other day that said, I think 47, or was it 47 or 67, of the percent of the millennials are getting ready to leave San Francisco because, as you said, it's dirty, the homeless people, it's not a very fun city. You're there to work, make a shitload of money, and then once you're there, you kind of leave, unless you're a local. So yeah, I mean, that's another probably conversation to be had about culture. And also, you touched something very interesting, and it's not the topic of our conversation, but the lynching culture in San Francisco. It's very interesting. We're supposed to be, so it's interesting because people say Silicon Valley, it's very open to failure. Like, you got to fail multiple times to make it at the end, so it's kind of very socially accepted. But also there are some sort of mistakes, you make them once and you're kind of done. But that's another.
Okay, so to get back on track with how do you identify? in what I've seen around the world, and I've made some angel investing, oddly enough, every investment I made outside of Lebanon has been very successful. So maybe don't invest in Lebanon. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's easier to see things when you're outside of your space. Anyway, so what I found to be a very significant primer of success outside of the Valley, okay, I haven't spent that much time there, is find someone that has a very good reason to make a difference in their community. And we're not talking social entrepreneurs, we're not talking people who want to save the world and hug trees, okay? We're talking someone who wants to build a business in their community that is going to be sustainable and make a difference in that community. And it doesn't have to be a local startup, but they have family there, they have a community there, they have attachment to the community, and they're building something that is going to be part of that community, even if it's a global product. And every one of the people I invested in had that profile, and they always come out on top because they enjoy it. It's a process, it's life, it's sustainable. If they have a problem, they can overcome it, and it's not just let's do whatever it takes and burn everything on the way.
They have meaning in the work they're doing.
Meaning, exactly.
Yeah, and I agree with that because there's so many undervalued startups outside the Valley right now. These guys are determined, they want to make an impact, and they value their community as well. So actually, the biggest advantage of the Silicon Valley is the money, so there's access to capital. There's not even access to human capital because it's impossible to find a developer and not to pay him like $300 an hour. But like in this part of the world, you can find some really good developers who are really, really hardworking, and they are, they're much cheaper, and they have actually something to prove. So I think the solution would be, there's not just one solution, but like try to bring capital to this part of the world, or like to places other than the Silicon Valley, so that the entrepreneurs who really have a positive drive for their community and eventually for the world, for the ecosystem, they get the funding they need, and so they can actually scale the business.
So is there any part of the world that you've seen that hasn't been recently infused with a lot of money? Because I haven't been able to find a single market that...
North Korea.
Locally or from outside?
Local. So Southeast Asia is catered to by Singapore, okay, and now local Thailand, so on and so forth funds. Europe has had so much money thrown at it by the EU that all of a sudden it's cash rich. Okay, everybody has a fund.
Yeah, but I'm talking about pre-seed, seed investors. Even in London, I spent my last 3 years splitting my time between Istanbul and London. Even if you're like, an angel investor, there's not so many of them. Mm-hmm. It's not a common thing.
Really?
Yeah, go to London, talk to people.
No, because
in Lebanon, in Beirut, I don't know, are there many angel investors?
EU funding and EIF funding for funds is different, and they just shut it down for UK.
Okay. Yeah, but that's
just because of that reason, because apparently there were 400 new fund managers in London trying to get money from the EIF, saying that they're starting a fund and they have no track record as investors.
That's what happens with every iteration of that. So SEIS and EIS projects in the UK created a lot of first-time angel investors. That I'll give an example. Bindi's in the crowd, I think, or maybe not. One of her friends created a startup called Borrow My Doggy. Okay.
I invested in their competitor.
Okay.
Tailster.
I don't even want to know how we have this on stage, but yeah. So Borrow My Doggy would never have flown were it not for, I think, SEIS, which is an angel support program that was based out of the UK, that was a tax break, basically.
See, there's not so many angel investors, so government has to support them with programs and everything.
That's fine, because that's how you create them.
Which is not bad.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of value, not in the VC space. There's so many private equities and VCs, because a lot of ex-bankers, they don't have the capacity to become angel investors because they are not smart money. The moment it's math, they can see a spreadsheet, the Excel, now they consider investing, so that's either a VC or private equity. So the angel investor is actually the guy who can actually understand the business, understand the early stage problems of a startup and the entrepreneur, and they put their money and their intelligence in the business and help them get to the next level. So these type of people and this type of capital is still not very much present outside the US. It's early stage. We see it in Turkey. There's only how many? 20 active angel investors in Turkey. How much money have they invested in the last year? $2 million max. So I don't know in Malta, are there any angel investors in this hall? Can I see hands?
So many hands.
Yeah, here.
There's one.
One in the back.
I'm just curious though, so Baromaidogi does exactly what it sounds like it does?
I think
Okay,
that's the well branded. Yeah.
So Jenn, going back to you, I'm interested, so one thing that I'm observing a lot, being in San Francisco, but also traveling a lot outside of the Valley, people keep asking me how they can start investing in some of the countries I travel to, and that's something that never happened before.
Right.
So what do you think are some of the challenges or pitfalls that these investors can fall into when they're trying to invest outside of the Valley with their Valley mindset? Do you think that can set them back a little bit?
Definitely. I mean, well, first to go to what Firat said, right? Like, you need to have a good point of view about what market you're investing into. And if you're using the same patterns you've used to only invest in Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, they will fail. They're guaranteed to fail because they're not solving the same kind of problems, they're not approaching the same ecosystems. And also, you have a massive competition right now in angel investments in Silicon Valley. So because there are so many there, and that's actually where all the deal flow value is now moved to, people want to be smart money earlier on globally. So they're actually looking for those returns abroad. And there's so many people here who are traveling and with that same point of view to take care of that. And I think there's also the sense that, yes, everybody does come to San Francisco at some point, but before they ever get there, you want to know what they're doing and what they're up to. So
my next question is for Firat, because not only you're an investor, but you've also run a global company that built some of the most innovative apps out there. So in the Valley, we constantly hear about the app fatigue or the problems of the app economy, because people believe that it's hard for our generation to start downloading new apps, and there's all this fatigue out there. So do you think it's really true that there is no more invention to be had in that part, or are we ready for mobile 2.0?
Well, app discovery is actually, people are spending so much money to be seen on the App Store. This is also the phenomena which is similar to e-commerce. So almost half of marketing budget of all startups goes to either Facebook or Google. So if you want to have an app, if you want to have an app business, so like mobile banking is an app, but it's not an app business. It's banking in mobile. So it's not an app business. If you really want to have an app business, there's three things that are relevant. Either you buy something, either you message something. It's either purchasing, messaging, or gaming. So I can't really think of a fourth. So if it's not that, maybe content, let's say. But if it's not that, if it's not original, then your app is not going to work out. And it's very easy to actually come up with the equation. If you're not doing some direct messaging, if there's not going to be a lot of people signing up for your application and messaging each other, if they're not going to use it for content, if they're not going to buy anything, just don't build that app. Just don't build it. And in terms of the app economy, I'm quite confused because an app is a transformation of an existing business sometimes. Or is it just a new business? So that's the question they need to be asking themselves. But it's not like you built a Snake type of Nokia game back in 2010 on the App Store, and suddenly 1 million people downloads it, and then you have AdWords, and they just make $10,000 a day. It's not going to happen anymore.
The next two questions are going to be rapid fire questions. So if we can just run down the line. So first one is, what are some of the areas you're most excited about for the next coming year?
Ooh.
Pass.
You can pass.
I'll come back to me. Go ahead.
Okay, let's start with
It's a blend of big data, gig economy, IoT, with a little bit of SaaS on top of it.
What about AI?
Oh, so I forgot AI.
I already said mine, but do you want me to say it again? I gave a keynote a while ago. You missed it. It's okay. I love you anyways. Moral frameworks, the intersection of biology and technology, and worlds imagined by women, what that looks broadly.
Still pass.
Okay, I'll fill in for you. For me, I would probably say food tech, ag tech, and women's healthcare. So, and next rapid fire question, keep it very fast because we're short of time. So, what are some of the first red flags that you would see as an investor in startups pitches in the first minute or two?
Humility.
As a red flag?
If people don't have humility or lack of humility, and this is a very big problem in very specific cultures. It's a red flag beyond your wildest imagination. Humility, unfortunately, is difficult to describe because you want confidence, but there's a very fine line between confidence and arrogance. And once you cross that line, it's very difficult to work with these people. And they may be very successful, but they will do it at the expense of others. And I think humility for me is at the top of the game.
Similar, different, they're good listeners. If the person across from you can listen, can interpret, and follow along. If they can't do that, then it's a red flag.
Trustworthiness is very important. If your employees trust you, if your investors and if your customers trust you, then it kind of covers most of the topics, most of the traits one person should have.
We have 20 seconds left. Last question.
And you, what do you think? Your opinion on that?
Well, I have one more question though, then I'll answer it.
Okay.
One company that you met recently that you're super excited about.
Interesting company?
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be your portfolio company.
It is my portfolio. They're here actually, TVM Media. They're based out of Stockholm. And go find them. They're doing amazing ad tech products.
They're not new anymore, but segment.com, I think they're doing a lot of great things. So.
A blockchain database company that I met in Berlin. I'm very bad with names, but they are trying to help people figure out.
You were that excited.
It was very exciting. They blew my mind. But they're helping the world move data onto blockchain so as to create more persistence and transparency in all data. And I think that blows my mind because it's the closest to the truth that we've ever been to historically as mankind. So it's quite impressive shit.
Okay, and I know time is up, but just to go back to our question, red flags, you were asking me, right? I have an investment banking background. I'm super financial, so when I look at what they're going to do with the money, if they talk about paying existing debts or I look at basically what they're going to do with the money pretty much. But okay. I see so many startups they're already in the hole and they're trying to raise more money and trying to save it. But in my experience with my own angel investments, that usually didn't work that well. So that's probably a red flag I will look at.
Cool.
Okay, time is up. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.